I think I didn't do anything wrong. I just asked for some space and honesty in my marriage. But the next thing I knew, Malcolm quietly let me pack my bags, and then served me with divorce papers. I never imagined he would actually go through with it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning light filtered through our kitchen blinds as I watched Malcolm pour his coffee with that same methodical precision he brought to everything. His IT job had made him cautious, analytical, traits that used to comfort me, but now felt suffocating. I've been thinking, I said, setting down my mug harder than necessary. I need some space to figure things out. Malcolm's hand paused mid-pour. What kind of space, Seraphine? Just time with friends, time to breathe. You know how close Kellen and I have always been since college. I feel like I've lost myself in all this domestic routine. His dark eyes searched my face. At 34, Malcolm had grown quieter over our 8 years of marriage, more withdrawn. Sometimes I wondered if he even cared anymore. Is this about us? He asked softly. It's about me, I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. I need to rediscover who I am outside of being a wife and mother. Malcolm nodded slowly, that passive acceptance that both attracted and frustrated me. Okay, what do you need? Maybe some weekends away, girl time with Kellen, nothing dramatic. I watched his jaw tighten slightly. Kellen's married too, isn't she? Of course. Jenna's lovely. We all hang out together sometimes. I reached across to touch his hand. Malcolm, you're being controlling. Can't you trust me to have friendships? He pulled back slightly. I'm not being controlling, You just what? Think I can't handle having a social life? I stood up, letting hurt creep into my voice. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't understand my needs. Malcolm's mother Lydia chose that moment to call. I could hear her concerned voice through the phone as Malcolm stepped into the living room. She's asking for space, Malcolm said quietly, but I could still hear him. I don't know what to do, Mom. Something's not right about this, Lydia's voice carried. A wife doesn't just ask for space unless... I have to trust her, Malcolm interrupted. When he returned to the kitchen, his face was resigned. Fine, take your weekends. But Seraphine, if something's wrong between us, we should talk about it. Nothing's wrong that a little breathing room won't fix, I said, already mentally planning my first trip to see Kellen. That Friday, I packed a small suitcase while 8-year-old Eli watched cartoons in the living room. Malcolm sat at his computer, typing with mechanical precision, but I caught him glancing at me. It's just 2 days, I said, folding a silk blouse Kellen had always complimented. I'll be back Sunday evening. Have fun, Malcolm said, but his voice sounded hollow. As I wheeled my suitcase to the door, I saw Malcolm's reflection in the hallway mirror. He looked broken, defeated. For a moment, guilt twisted in my stomach, but then I thought about Kellen's warm laugh, his understanding eyes, the way he actually listened to me. Take care of Eli, I said, kissing Malcolm's cheek. His skin felt cold. I always do, he replied. As I drove away, I glanced back to see Malcolm standing in our doorway, watching me leave. Something in his stillness made me uncomfortable, but I pushed the feeling aside. I deserved happiness, didn't I? The coffee shop buzzed with Monday morning energy as I sat across from my sister Cora, stirring cream into my latte. She'd always been my closest confidant, understanding me in ways Malcolm never seemed to. So, how was your weekend getaway? Cora asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. Exactly what I needed, I said, unable to suppress a smile. Kellen and I talked for hours. He really gets me, you know. He understands what I'm going through. And Jenna was okay with you monopolizing her husband's time. I waved dismissively. She was busy with her own things. Besides, Kellen and I are just friends. We have history, college, shared experiences. It's not like Malcolm has ever shown that kind of interest in my thoughts and feelings. Cora leaned forward. Seraphine, you sound different, happier. I am happier. For the first time in years, I feel like someone actually sees me. I took a sip of my latte, savoring both the warmth and the memory of Kellen's hand brushing mine as we'd walked through the park. Malcolm's so passive, so weak. He just accepts everything without fighting for us, for me. Maybe he's trying to be supportive, or maybe he doesn't care enough to fight. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Kellen says a real man would pursue his wife, would make an effort to understand her needs. Cora raised an eyebrow. Kellen said that. He's just being a good friend. He's helping me see that I deserve better than someone who barely notices when I'm unhappy. As if summoned by our conversation, Jenna appeared at our table. Kellen's wife looked tired, her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Seraphine, she said, her voice carefully controlled. I was hoping I'd run into you. Jenna, how lovely. Would you like to join us? Actually, I need to talk to you about boundaries. Jenna's green eyes were cold. My husband came home from your weekend together, talking about your marriage problems. I don't think that's appropriate. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. We're friends, Jenna. Friends talk. Friends don't counsel each other about leaving their spouses. Cora shifted uncomfortably beside me. Maybe we should... Kellen never said I should leave Malcolm, I interrupted, though the memory of his whispered words, "You deserve someone who appreciates you," echoed in my mind. Didn't he? Jenna's voice was sharp. Because he's been very critical of Malcolm lately. A man he's never even met. That's not fair. Kellen's just concerned about my happiness. And I'm concerned about my marriage. Jenna leaned closer. Stay away from my husband, Seraphine. Find someone else to validate your midlife crisis. She left before I could respond, leaving me staring after her in shock. Wow, Cora said softly. She seems really upset. She's overreacting. Kellen and I haven't done anything wrong. But even as I said it, I thought about the way Kellen had held my hand when I'd cried about Malcolm's indifference, the way he'd looked at me when he'd said I was beautiful and deserved better. That evening, Malcolm was unusually quiet during dinner. Eli chatted about school, but Malcolm's responses were distracted, mechanical. Everything okay? I asked, though part of me hoped he wouldn't want to talk. I was still thinking about my conversation with Kellen, the plans we'd made for another weekend together. Fine, Malcolm said, but he was looking at his phone with a strange expression. Just checking our bank statement. There's a charge I don't recognize. My stomach dropped. The hotel room I'd split with Kellen, the expensive restaurant where we'd had dinner while Jenna worked late. Probably just a mistake, I said quickly. You know how these things are. Malcolm nodded, but I saw him take a photo of his phone screen. The gesture was so unlike him, so suspicious and calculated, that it made me nervous. I'm going to call Kellen, I said, standing up. I promised I'd check in about our next visit. Of course you did, Malcolm said quietly. As I walked to the bedroom to make my call, I heard Malcolm's chair scrape against the floor. When I glanced back, he was still staring at his phone, his expression unreadable. Something had shifted, but I told myself it was just guilt making me paranoid. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just finally taking care of my own needs for once. The party at Mike and Sarah's house was in full swing when Malcolm and I arrived. Mike had been Malcolm's friend since college, one of the few people who seemed to genuinely appreciate my husband's quiet nature. I'd spent extra time getting ready. Wearing the dress Kellen had said brought out my eyes. Malcolm wore his usual khakis and button-down shirt, safe, boring, predictable. Seraphine, Malcolm. Sarah greeted us with wine glasses. So glad you could make it. As we mingled, I found myself surrounded by the usual crowd of couples. The conversation turned to weekend plans, and I saw my opportunity. Well, I'm planning another girls' weekend, I announced, taking a generous sip of wine. Poor Malcolm will have to survive without me again. Another one? Asked Jennifer, Mike's sister. Didn't you just go away last weekend? A woman needs her independence, I laughed, though I'm not sure Malcolm even noticed I was gone. He was probably relieved to have the house to himself. I glanced at Malcolm, expecting his usual passive smile, but his face was tight with embarrassment. "That's not true," he said quietly. "Oh, come on," I continued, emboldened by the wine and the attention. "You barely looked up from your computer when I left. I could probably disappear for a week, and you'd just assume I was in another room." A few people laughed uncomfortably. Mike shot Malcolm a concerned look. "Malcolm's very attentive," Sarah said diplomatically. "Attentive to his code, maybe." I was on a roll now, enjoying the spotlight. I swear, sometimes I think he loves his computer more than me. At least it responds when he talks to it. The laughter was more strained now. Malcolm's face had gone pale. "Seraphine," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "can we not do this here?" "Do what? Tell the truth?" I turned to the group. "How many of you have husbands who say maybe 10 words a day, who never ask about your feelings or dreams or anything deeper than what's for dinner?" "That's enough," Malcolm said, standing up abruptly. "See?" I gestured at him. "This is what I mean. Instead of engaging, instead of defending our relationship, he just shuts down. It's like being married to a ghost." Malcolm stared at me for a long moment, his dark eyes filled with something I'd never seen before. Not hurt, but a cold, calculating anger. "Excuse me," he said to the group, "I need some air." As he walked toward the door, I felt a moment of unease. "He's being dramatic," I said to the remaining guests, but the mood had shifted. People were looking at their drinks, at their phones, anywhere but at me. "Maybe you should go after him," Mike suggested, his voice carefully neutral. "He'll be fine. He always is." But even as I said it, I saw Mike exchange a look with Sarah. 10 minutes later, Mike returned alone. "Malcolm went home," he announced. "Said he wasn't feeling well." "Of course he did," I sighed. "He can't handle any kind of honest conversation about our problems." "Honest?" Mike's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "You just humiliated your husband in front of his friends." "I was just being real about our relationship." "No, Seraphine, you were being cruel." The party continued, but I could feel the shift in energy. People were polite but distant. When I tried to continue the conversation about Malcolm's shortcomings, Sarah quickly changed the subject. I left early, driving home with a mixture of anger and confusion. Why was everyone taking Malcolm's side? Why couldn't they see that I was the one suffering in this marriage? When I got home, Malcolm was in his study, typing with unusual intensity. Eli was already in bed. "You embarrassed me tonight," I said, standing in the doorway. Malcolm didn't look up from his screen. "I embarrassed you?" "Yes, walking out like that, making me look like the bad guy." Finally, he turned to face me. His expression was completely calm, which somehow made it more unsettling than anger would have been. "Seraphine, I documented everything you said tonight. Every joke at my expense, every public humiliation. I'm keeping records now." "Records? What are you talking about?" "I'm protecting myself," he said simply. "And Eli." "Protecting yourself from what?" "From you." The words hit me like a slap. "I'm your wife, Malcolm. I'm not your enemy." "Aren't you?" He turned back to his computer, dismissing me. As I stood there, watching him type with methodical precision, I realized that something fundamental had changed. The passive, accepting Malcolm I'd married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was keeping records. The following weeks fell into a tense routine. Malcolm was polite but distant, going through the motions of family life while maintaining an emotional wall I couldn't breach. Meanwhile, my conversations with Kellen grew longer and more intimate. "He's documenting things about me," I told Kellen during one of our daily phone calls. "Like I'm some kind of criminal." "That's controlling behavior," Kellen replied, his voice warm with sympathy. "You deserve better than living under surveillance." "I know. It's just, he's never been like this before." Maybe he's finally showing his true colors. Some men put on an act until they think they have you trapped. I was calling from my office during lunch break, grateful for the privacy. As an office manager, I had my own space and could speak freely. "I need to see you again," I said quietly. "This weekend, I need someone who actually understands me." "Of course. Jenna's working a double shift Saturday, so we'll have plenty of time to talk." After hanging up, I felt lighter. Kellen was right. Malcolm's behavior was unacceptable. A loving husband would be trying to fix our problems, not building a case against me. That evening, I announced my weekend plans over dinner. "Another girls' weekend?" Malcolm asked, cutting Eli's chicken with mechanical precision. "I need it, Malcolm. This tension between us is suffocating me." "What tension?" Eli asked, looking between us with worried eyes. "Nothing, sweetheart," I said quickly. "Mummy just needs some friend time." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Which friends exactly?" "You know, the usual group. Kellen, maybe some others." "Kellen isn't a girl, Seraphine." The observation hung in the air like an accusation. Eli continued eating, but I could see him listening intently. "He's a friend," I said firmly. "I'm allowed to have male friends." "Of course you are. I just want to understand where you're going and who you're with." "For safety reasons." "Since when do you care about my safety?" "I've always cared. I'm just being more vocal about it now." After Eli went to bed, Malcolm retreated to his study as usual. I decided to use our shared tablet to look up restaurants near Kellen's place. As I opened the browser, I noticed Malcolm's email was still logged in. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on his sent folder and found emails to Mike, his mother, and someone named David Chen, apparently a lawyer. My blood ran cold as I read the subject lines. Documentation needed for custody case. Financial records request. Evidence gathering timeline. He was planning to divorce me. Not only that, he was building a case for custody of Eli. I scrolled through the emails, my hands shaking. Malcolm had been methodically documenting everything. My weekend trips, our joint finances, even screenshots of my social media posts about needing space and understanding. The most recent email to the lawyer included photos of credit card statements showing charges at hotels and restaurants during my weekend with Kellen. He'd even included GPS data from our shared family plan, showing my car parked at Kellen's address for hours at a time. Looking at something interesting, I spun around to find Malcolm standing in the doorway, his expression calm, but his eyes hard. "You're planning to divorce me," I said, my voice shaking with anger and shock. "I'm planning to protect myself and my son." "Your son? Eli is our son." "Is he? Because lately, it seems like you're more interested in playing house with Kellen than being a mother to Eli." I stood up, the tablet clutched in my hands. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm allowed to have friends, to need emotional support." Emotional support that involves overnight stays in hotels, romantic dinners while his wife works late. Come on, Seraphine. I may be quiet, but I'm not stupid. "You followed me." "I didn't have to. You're using our joint credit card and our family phone plan. Every move you make leaves a digital trail." The calm, analytical way he spoke made it worse somehow. This wasn't the passionate confrontation of a jealous husband. It was the methodical dismantling of my life by someone who'd been planning this for weeks. "I want to work on our marriage," I said desperately. "We can go to counseling. We can fix this." "Can we? Because from where I stand, you've already made your choice. You've just been too cowardly to make it official." "That's not true." "Then prove it. Cut contact with Kellen. Cancel your weekend plans. Show me that you want to save this marriage." I stared at him, my mind racing. The thought of losing Kellen, of going back to the suffocating routine of our marriage, made me feel panicked. I need time to think." Malcolm nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. The lawyer said you'd probably ask for time when confronted with evidence." "You discussed this with a lawyer?" "I discussed protecting my rights and my son's future. Something I should have done weeks ago. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Seraphine, I did love you. I would have fought for us if you'd given me something to fight for, but you can't save a marriage when only one person is in it. As he walked away, I sank back into the chair, staring at the tablet screen. The emails were still open, showing the careful, methodical way Malcolm had been building his case. I'd underestimated him completely. The passive, accepting husband I'd taken for granted was gone, replaced by someone who'd been 3 steps ahead of me all along. Monday morning arrived with official-looking papers slid under our bedroom door. I found them when I woke up. Malcolm already gone to work, and Eli eating cereal in the kitchen under Lydia's watchful eye. "Grandma's taking me to school today," Eli announced cheerfully, unaware of the papers that were about to destroy our family. I waited until they left before opening the envelope. Divorce papers, custody petition, financial disclosure requirements, all filed and official, requesting joint custody of Eli and an equitable division of assets. My hands shook as I read through the supporting documentation Malcolm had attached. Bank statements highlighting unexplained charges, screenshots of text messages between Kellen and me that somehow Malcolm had accessed, GPS data showing my location during times I'd claimed to be elsewhere. But the most damaging evidence was a series of photos and videos I didn't even know existed. Images of Kellen and me holding hands at a restaurant, a video of us kissing in the parking lot of his apartment complex, screenshots of social media posts where I'd complained about Malcolm to mutual friends. How had he gotten these? Then I remembered Mike at the party, his phone out, his disappointed expression. Malcolm's friend had been documenting everything. I called Kellen immediately. "He's filing for divorce," I said without preamble. "He has photos, Kellen, photos of us together." There was a long pause. "What kind of photos?" "Us holding hands, kissing. He knows everything." Another pause, longer this time. "Seraphine, maybe this is for the best. You've been unhappy for years." "For the best? He's asking for joint custody. He could take Eli away from me." "Look, I care about you, but this is getting complicated. Jenna's already suspicious, and if your husband has evidence..." "Are you abandoning me?" "I'm being realistic. We both knew this couldn't stay secret forever." After he hung up, I sat in our kitchen, soon to be Malcolm's kitchen, and felt truly alone for the first time in years. When Malcolm came home that evening, he was carrying boxes. "What are those for?" I asked. "I'm moving out tonight. Mike's letting me stay at his place until the custody arrangement is finalized." "Malcolm, please, we can work this out." He set the boxes down and looked at me with that same calm expression that had become so unsettling. "Can we?" "Because I spoke with Kellen's wife today. Jenna was very interested to learn about your weekend getaways. Turns out she's been working extra shifts to pay for marriage counseling she thought might help her distant husband reconnect with her." I felt sick. "You told Jenna?" "I didn't have to. She called me after she found hotel receipts in Kellen's jacket pocket. Receipts that matched the charges on our credit card statement. Oh, God. She's filing for divorce too, by the way. Apparently, she's been documenting Kellen's behavior as well. Turns out suspicious spouses think alike." As Malcolm packed his clothes, I followed him around our bedroom like a lost child. "I never meant for this to happen," I said. "I was just lonely, Malcolm. I felt invisible in our marriage." "You were never invisible to me," he replied, folding his shirts with the same methodical precision he brought to everything. "You just stopped looking. We can go to counseling. We can fix this." "With what foundation? Trust? Respect? Love?" He paused in his packing. "Seraphine, you've spent months telling anyone who would listen how inadequate I am as a husband. You've humiliated me publicly and betrayed me privately. What exactly is left to fix?" "Our family. Eli needs both his parents." "Eli will have both his parents. He just won't have to live in a house full of contempt and lies anymore." When Malcolm finished packing, he knelt down to hug Eli, who had been watching the proceedings with confused, frightened eyes. "Daddy's going to stay at Uncle Mike's for a while," Malcolm explained gently. "But I'll see you every day, okay? This isn't about you, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong." "Are you and Mommy getting divorced?" Eli asked in a small voice. Malcolm glanced at me, then back at our son. "We're having some grown-up problems that we need to solve, but no matter what happens, we both love you very much." After Malcolm left, the house felt enormous and empty. I called Cora, desperate for support. "He actually filed papers," I told her. "He's trying to take Eli away from me." "He can't do that," Cora said firmly. "You're Eli's mother. Courts always favor the mother. Not when the mother is having an affair." "It wasn't really an affair, though, was it? You said you were just friends." I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the photos, about the evidence Malcolm had gathered, about the fact that Kellen had essentially abandoned me the moment things got difficult. "Cora, what am I going to do?" "Fight back," she said fiercely. "Don't let Malcolm intimidate you. He's been controlling and emotionally distant for years. Any judge will see that." But as I hung up the phone and looked around our empty house, I wondered if any judge would see things the way Cora did. Malcolm had been building his case for weeks, maybe months. Every piece of evidence was documented, verified, legally sound. I'd been playing checkers while he'd been playing chess. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I sat beside my lawyer, Jennifer Walsh, watching Malcolm and his attorney, David Chen, organize their evidence with military precision. "They have a lot of documentation," Jennifer whispered to me. "But we can argue emotional neglect, lack of communication. Make the case that you were driven to seek companionship elsewhere." I nodded, though my confidence had been shattered weeks ago when Kellen had refused to testify on my behalf. He'd moved out of state, claiming a job opportunity, leaving me to face the consequences of our relationship alone. Judge Patricia Morrison called the court to order. She was a stern woman in her 60s who looked like she'd heard every sob story and excuse imaginable. "This is a petition for divorce and child custody," she began. "Mr. Chen, please present your client's case." Malcolm's lawyer stood up, his presentation crisp and professional. "Your Honor, my client Malcolm Alder is requesting joint custody of his 8-year-old son Eli, along with an equitable division of marital assets. We have substantial evidence of infidelity and emotional abandonment by Mrs. Alder." The evidence parade began. Bank statements showing unexplained charges, GPS data from our family phone plan, screenshots of text messages between Kellen and me that I'd thought were private, but the most damaging evidence was a series of character witness statements. Mike testified about the party where I'd humiliated Malcolm publicly. Sarah corroborated his account. Even some of our mutual friends had provided statements about my behavior over the past months. Mrs. Alder consistently portrayed her husband as inadequate and unloving, Mike testified. She seemed to take pleasure in embarrassing him in front of friends. It was uncomfortable to witness. When Jenna took the stand via video call from her new home in Oregon, I felt the last of my hope drain away. "Mrs. Price, can you describe your interactions with the defendant?" Chen asked. "Seraphine pursued an emotional and physical relationship with my husband," Jenna said, her voice steady but cold. "She manipulated him by portraying herself as trapped in an unhappy marriage. When I confronted her about appropriate boundaries, she became defensive and accused me of overreacting." "Did you witness any interactions between Mrs. Alder and your husband?" "Yes. I have photos from a restaurant where they were holding hands and kissing. I also have hotel receipts that match charges on the Alders' joint credit card." Jennifer tried to mount a defense, calling Cora to testify about Malcolm's emotional distance and my unhappiness in the marriage. But every argument seemed to fall flat against the mountain of evidence Malcolm had accumulated. When it was my turn to testify, I tried to explain my side of the story. "I was lonely, Your Honor. Malcolm worked long hours and barely communicated with me. I felt invisible in my own marriage." So you began an affair? Judge Morrison asked bluntly. It wasn't supposed to be an affair. Kellen was my friend from college. He listened to me, understood me in ways Malcolm never did. Did you spend nights in hotels with this friend? I hesitated. Yes, but... Did you lie to your husband about your whereabouts? I told him I was having girls' weekends. With a married man? Your Honor, I was emotionally starved in my marriage. Malcolm never fought for us, never showed passion or interest in fixing our problems. Judge Morrison looked at me over her glasses. Mrs. Alder, did you ever suggest marriage counseling to your husband? I paused. Not formally, no. Did you ever directly tell him you were considering ending the marriage? I asked for space to think. While conducting a relationship with another man. It wasn't like that. But even as I said it, I could hear how hollow it sounded. The judge's expression made it clear she wasn't buying my justifications. Malcolm took the stand last, his testimony calm and factual. I loved my wife, Your Honor. When she asked for space, I gave it to her because I wanted her to be happy. I didn't realize she was using that space to pursue another relationship. How did you discover the affair? I noticed unusual charges on our credit card and inconsistencies in her stories about where she'd been. I began documenting things to protect myself and my son. Do you believe joint custody is in the child's best interest? Yes, Your Honor. Despite our marital problems, I believe Eli needs both parents in his life. I'm not trying to take him away from his mother. I just want to ensure he has stability and honesty in at least one of his homes. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting the divorce petition. Mrs. Alder's conduct shows a pattern of deception and infidelity that has damaged the marriage beyond repair. Joint custody will be awarded with alternating weeks and shared holidays. Assets will be divided equitably, with consideration given to Mrs. Alder's misuse of marital funds for personal relationships. As the gavel fell, I felt my world collapse. I'd lost my marriage, half my time with Eli, and a significant portion of our assets. The friends who had supported me through my lonely marriage were now testifying against me. Kellen was gone, having moved on to his next opportunity without a backward glance. Outside the courthouse, Malcolm approached me one final time. For what it's worth, Seraphine, I'm sorry it came to this. Are you? Because it seems like you planned this perfectly. I planned to protect myself when it became clear you'd already checked out of our marriage. I gave you every opportunity to choose us. You never fought for me. I did fight for you, just not the way you wanted me to. I fought by being faithful, by being present, by trying to give you what you said you needed, but it was never enough because you'd already decided I wasn't enough. As he walked away with his lawyer, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding for months. Malcolm hadn't been weak or passive. He'd been patient and strategic. While I'd been playing games and seeking validation elsewhere, he'd been quietly building a new life that didn't depend on my approval or presence. I'd wanted him to fight for me, but in the end, he'd fought smarter. He'd fought for himself and for Eli, and he'd won. The entitled wife who'd thought she deserved better had discovered that better was exactly what her husband had found. A life free from manipulation, public humiliation, and betrayal. Standing alone on the courthouse steps, I finally understood that I hadn't been the victim of a weak husband's neglect. I'd been the architect of my own destruction, and Malcolm had simply handed me the tools to finish the job.